We are truly blessed to be in partnership with some great organizations and people. But why are we here? We are here because we recognize that Alzheimer's and dementia is a much needed discussion about health of the African American community and communities of color. We recognize that we need to improve our knowledge and understanding about Alzheimer's as it pertains to clinical trials and available treatment options. And so we're grateful for our partners who sought us out and came to an agreement that we would be an ideal host. So Teman A.M.E. Church here in Elizabeth, New Jersey is grateful for this opportunity to welcome you all to this conversation. Surely part one was fruitful. It was a blessing. We were inspired. We were encouraged. All of those adjectives that bring health and wellness can be applied here, and we're grateful. As the pastor of this church, I am blessed to be in partnership with people who come from a long tradition of people who've been on the front line of ensuring that we minister to the whole person and we minister beyond the walls. And we're grateful to God that we've been doing that for 162 years. Let's give God praise for that. So we also want to acknowledge and thank another segment of our community that is at Snyder Academy here in the city of Elizabeth. We're grateful for Jefferson Park Ministries being a part of this conversation, and we're grateful for the opportunity to ensure that not only relevant information is presented, but it is presented in a language that people can understand. So over at Snyder Academy, the presentations are being done in Creole for our Haitian community. We thank God for that. And so on today, we want to also acknowledge not only Jefferson Park Ministries, but we want to acknowledge the other partners who we are working with. And we're grateful for Lifelong Elizabeth. We're grateful for the Nesbitt Funeral Home. We're grateful for Union County Fatherhood Initiative Coalition, Alzheimer's Association, Jewish Family Services. And we're going to give a special welcome to two of our key sponsors. We're grateful for Hill Collaborative that brought this initiative to us and has informed us in ways that have really helped us be a valuable asset to our community, not only locally, but the global community. So we're thankful for Hill Collaborative, and we're also thankful for Biogen, key supporters, key organizers, helping this conversation come forward. And I want to give a special thanks to someone here at Teman who has really been leading the way for us, Dr. Cheryl Bellamy. We give her a big round of applause. Whether you're in the virtual space or you're in person, you definitely have an opportunity to be engaged in this conversation. For those of you in the virtual space, we want to make you aware of the fact that please utilize the chat. Your questions, your comments, look at the chat also for valuable information regarding resources and links to resources. We want you to be fully engaged in this conversation. And of course, you who are here, you will have an opportunity to ask questions, and we ask that you also follow other instructions that might be shared by other presenters. And we're grateful for our presenters that are here today. Please know that there will be cue cards to help you understand how much time you have. So pay attention to the cue cards. They're not numbers for anything else except that's how much time you have left. And I wish somebody gave me a cue card right now. But I need to now introduce two persons who will come and bring words of welcome. We want to introduce first and foremost Andrew Vigario from Biogen, and he'll be followed by Howard Mosby of Hill Collaborative, and we're grateful for these two persons.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you all again today on this beautiful Saturday morning. I know that it's tempting to want to be outside, but I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. For those who were not able to join us last week, and as well for the benefit of those who were but may have found it maybe challenging to remember all the names of everyone who came to speak, my name again is Andrew Vigario. I'm a clinical and country site lead with Biogen. And as Pastor Britt mentioned, we had a fantastic program here last Saturday. There's a lot of speakers, a lot of good information, and just here and then over at the Snyder Academy, it was just a thrill to be here last week. And I'm very excited to see today's presentations as well. Now, in case you see this, and full transparency, you might see me pop in and out of this room. So if you're wondering what's that about, I'm actually going to try to head over to the Snyder Academy. So here I am saying, okay, I'm excited about today. Okay, see you later. In case you're wondering, that's where I'll be. Now today we're going to hear from a variety of speakers. We've heard some of the names already, but I'm thrilled to hear Drs. Emma Wallace and George Banning to speak on the topic of brain health. We also have here with you today Dr. Michelle Papka of the Cognitive and Research Center of New Jersey in nearby Springfield. She's going to take an opportunity to talk to you all about clinical trials and the importance of getting involved with them. And I also want to take an opportunity, I think we've got a real special treat here for you today. We have a young woman by the name of Miss Valencia Julian who's going to speak today. I just found it so inspirational just reading about her. She took the time to write a book for children to teach them about Alzheimer's. So when we think about talking to the next generations about this disease and what's available to them, that work is just so important. I just want to give you a round of applause. So again, I hope you can walk away from today's program having learned all that more about Alzheimer's disease, and along with that, the opportunities that are available to you just here in the community. Again, I want to thank Pastor Britt, Dr. Bellamy, my friends at the HEAL Collaborative, everybody here, the many hands to make light work here, the AV crew, the folks making meals, the folks signing people in as they got here, just all the work that's been put together. I really deeply appreciate all of that. Now, before I go, I also wanted to take an opportunity, you probably see there, I just realized I got this on and I might want to see my smile. You can see right there, there's a link. It's called Biogen Trial Link. Now, this is a resource available to you. As today you're going to hear about clinical research opportunities, the company that I work for, Biogen, has a website where you can go on there and learn some information about different medical conditions, as well as some of the different research opportunities that are out there. So I see people are taking pictures. What we've done for you is that picture is actually printed out. So if you walk out of this room to the lobby there or right here on the side as you exit, we've got papers that are printed out with this image. So you've got the link to the website as well as the QR code. And that's not just research for Alzheimer's and memory disorders, but there's other studies that we have there for different conditions. So thank you again. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Howard Mosby. Oh, I'm sorry. There you go. Mr. Howard Mosby and Ms. Faith Danzy of the HEAL Collaborative to give their opening remarks.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. I'm just so grateful and actually full to see the community come out and once again listen to this workshop with this valuable information. Here, what we do is bring trusted information through a trusted source, which is the church. And we appreciate Mount Teman for allowing us to do this, and we're so happy to do this. I'm just kind of full because to see it come to fruition and to see the speakers and everyone and just how we just hunted everybody down. So we just want to thank you guys for showing up and bringing this valuable information.
Okay.
No cue card for me.
No, okay. And again, to Faith's point, my name is Howard Mosby. I'm one of the board members for the HEAL Collaborative. And we want to thank Mount Teman and Pastor Britt and the work that you all have done to actually bring this information to the community. Faith was modest here, but she has taken on the yeoman's job of bringing this information to this community. We're based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and to come to Elizabeth, New Jersey to put this on, and for her commitment has been just awesome. And I just want to personally thank you for the work that you've done. As we like to say, this is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. This information here is actually for you. It's for this community to be better, to do better, to live the abundant life as the Bible calls for us to do. And we want to make sure that everyone in our community has the equipment necessary to do that. And we are just happy to be here. And I don't know who comes after me, but I'm just glad to be here, and I want to thank Mount Teman for the work we've done here. So thank you. And I'll take the little mic thing on.
Truly, we thank God for what has been shared thus far. As we now prepare our hearts, minds, and souls to receive more information, let us just pause for a moment and look to the Lord in prayer, and then we will have someone else come up that I'm happy to introduce, but let us pray. Father God, we thank you for how you have blessed us once again. We pray now, Lord God, that what is shared today falls on good ground, that it might be received and understood and applied in our lives. So God, we thank you, for we know that you will do exceedingly abundantly more than we can ever ask or think, according to Holy Spirit power that is working in us and working for us, that there might be glory unto Christ Jesus in this generation and generations to come because of what you have done here today. It's in the name of the wonderful Counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, that we pray. Amen. I'm pleased now to introduce one of the daughters of this church who works in the medical field. She's doing a great job. And we want to thank Rachel Bellamy for now coming to help us move a little further in the program.
So I have the great honor of introducing our youth spotlight for this morning. So Miss Valencia Julian, a teen author from Morristown, New Jersey, published a new book called Giselle Learns About Alzheimer's. She has held workshops and readings to teach elementary children about this disease. So I think we're going to watch a video narration of the book first, and then we'll have her come up and answer some questions.
Illustrated by Sewell Easy Bassar. Woohoo! A soccer ball comes rolling down the stairs as Giselle screams from the top of the staircase. Mommy, I'm dressed and ready to go, she shouts. Okay, let's go, Giselle's dad shouts back. Where's Mommy? She's supposed to bring me to soccer practice today. Giselle loves going to soccer practices with her grandma. Her dad looked sad. Giselle learns about Alzheimer's. Valencia Julian. Illustrated by Sewell Bassar. Woohoo! A soccer ball comes rolling down the stairs as Giselle screams from the top of the staircase. Nani, I am dressed and ready to go, she shouts. Okay, let's go, Giselle's dad shouts back. Where's Nani? She's supposed to bring me to soccer practice today. Giselle loves going to soccer practices with her grandma. Her dad looked sad. He said, Nani is at the doctor's and cannot take you to practice anymore. When Giselle came home from practice, Nani was on the couch. Giselle asked, Nani, how was your doctor's visit today? Nani answered, No, Giselle, my appointment is on Thursday. Today is Monday. Giselle was very puzzled because today was Thursday. "Nani, why can you not take me to practice any more?" she questioned. Nani replies, "My memory is not as good as it used to be, Alejandro." Giselle was shocked. Nani never confused her for her big brother. Giselle was so scared. So she ran to her big brother, Alejandro, and asked what was wrong with Nani. Alejandro said, "Nani is sick with something that makes older people lose their memory. It's called Alzheimer's." The next day, Giselle ate breakfast and then went on the school bus. She was very tired because she spent all night thinking about her grandma. When she got to her third grade classroom, she asked her teacher, Mr. Agnew, if he knew what Alzheimer's was. "Yes, I do," he said. "If you stay in for recess, we can search it up together." Giselle waited for the clock to pass all day long. Then finally, it was recess. All the kids rushed out of the room, but Giselle stayed inside waiting for Mr. Agnew. They spent the whole recess learning about Alzheimer's, and now she was so excited to have all of this new information. When her mom picked her up, Giselle shared what she learned. "Did you know that Alzheimer's is a disease that affects your brain? The cells in your brain are slowly getting weaker and then do not work anymore," she said. "Alzheimer's can make you lose your memory and cause confusion." Her mom said, "Wow, I did not know that. What are you going to do with all of this new information, Smarty Pants?" "Well, now I can help out at home," Giselle said. "I will put sticky notes on the wall to help Nani remember stuff, and I'll sing her favorite songs because that also helps with memory." She told her mom, "And as a family, we can do a lot of puzzles with Nani too, because puzzles help your brain." Giselle's mom was so happy that Giselle took the time to learn so much. When they arrived home, Giselle got to work. Giselle exercised with Nani by doing dance routines. Exercise helps everyone remember things better. Giselle also played her Nani's favorite pop song playlist on her tablet while she was sitting in her room. Giselle was so happy that she learned something new, and even happier that she gets to help her Nani after all the times her Nani spent helping Giselle. This book was created by a Girl Scout, Valencia Julian. This project was not just to attain her Gold Award. It is also personal. She was inspired to educate young minds on Alzheimer's because of her experience growing up with her grandparents. She dedicates this book to her late grandfather, Jean Papa Figaro. Special thanks to the Girl Scouts of Northern New Jersey, Robin Cohn, Simone Beatty,
Thank you so much for being here with us.
Of course.
So we just have some questions, of course. I have some prepared questions, and then I think we'll have a few minutes to take Q&A from the audience. But just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Valencia Julian. I'm 17 years old. I'm a senior in high school currently. I attend Morristown High School in Morristown, New Jersey, so just about 30 to 40 minutes away from here. I'm an advocate in many ways other than for Alzheimer's. I participate in my school's equity and inclusion organization, working to create inclusion for everyone on the physical disability spectrum, as well as mental disability, race, gender, and sexuality. So.
Wow, I think that deserves a hand. All right. So tell us, how old were you when you wrote the book, and when did you first start to notice changes in your own experience?
I finished the book at the end of my sophomore year. So I was 16 years old. I began writing the book when I was 15. And that was like a rough process in itself because it was smack in the middle of the pandemic, and I had a short time frame to get my Gold Award project done. But it was the book was based on true experience. So when it came to like finishing and jotting down like the storyboard, that was fairly easy. My grandfather recently passed with Alzheimer's, And, thank you. And my story follows the story of the book pretty much exactly. When I was in second grade, he stopped picking me up from elementary school. And that was the first sign that there was something wrong, but I didn't quite understand what it was, which is one of the reasons for the book. I wasn't really cognitive as to what was going on and like why there was a sudden change in balance in my family, because we lost a structure when as he became ill, and there were a few moments where he didn't remember my name or didn't know why I was at his house, and like that's when I started to become a little more aware that what was going on, and then I had to educate myself on like what exactly Alzheimer's is.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow, awesome. Was there a particular moment, I know you said that you wrote the book in your sophomore year, was there a particular moment where you realized you wanted to help other people understand Alzheimer's?
Yeah, my sophomore year, I was scrolling through TikTok, or my freshman year, I was scrolling through TikTok at the beginning of the pandemic, and I had seen a TikTok about Alzheimer's and singing helping with memory. And my grandfather played the piano for many years and loved to sing. He was like a part of the church choir and whatnot. And there was a moment where we sang Frère Jacques in our dining room, and that like definitely inspired me and was the turning point to write the book, because I had no clue what to do my project on. And I had realized how much time I missed doing things with my grandfather, because I had like no idea what activities I could do that also benefited him.
Awesome. Okay. Well, so we know that you hold workshops and readings for elementary school kids. What kind of feedback have you gotten from them?
The kids soaked up all the information like a sponge. It made me realize that kids are way more smarter than I thought, because the entire time I'm like, okay, I have to dumb this down, dumb this down. But they understood things and asked questions that I didn't even think about for my sessions. They were asking about neuroscience, if I was interested in becoming a neuroscientist. They were interested, well, most of the questions were, can I get Alzheimer's now? Or I think my sister has Alzheimer's because she's always forgetting stuff. So, but they like genuinely enjoyed the book and genuinely enjoyed learning, which was like something I was pleasantly surprised by.
Wow, that's awesome. Are you planning to write any more books?
Yes, the intent with the book was to create a series called Giselle Learns About. Although I was prompted by the Girl Scout Gold Award, I had set up the book and the characters in order to continue. Giselle, the character, is based on a little girl I used to babysit who is biracial. So my intent with Giselle was to eventually have a book about Black history. Giselle learns about Black history, and delve in further than Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, and like further than like the surface level of what we're taught in school. And she has a brother in the book, Alejandro, who I have like set up in his story arc, that he's Latino. So they come from a blended family. So it'd be Giselle learns about blended families. So I didn't want this markup American family to represent my book. I wanted a book that represented a lot of people, so I could continue further than Alzheimer's.
Wow, what a vision. Right? So what advice would you give to other young people who are interested in authoring books or just in youth advocacy? What advice would you give them?
I'd say to just go for it. You can do anything you put your mind to. Whether it's writing a book or whether it's going to a march or whether it's joining an organization, if you want to do it, you can succeed. Like that's pretty much what I have. Like Socrates said, I think, therefore I am. I'm in philosophy right now. And I just think that's a great quote, because as long as you believe in yourself and believe it, then you can become what you need to.
Awesome. What an example for youth advocacy. Let's give her a hand. So I think we have a few minutes to take some questions from the audience, if anyone wants to ask her questions about the book or about her experience. Anyone at all? Any young people with, oh, go ahead.
My mom definitely helped me plan out the book, and she, you know, there were nights where she like sat me down and said like, you had to get X amount of work done today. But as for writing the actual story, nobody helped me with that. I did have an English teacher who is a family friend at the school, at my church, who edited the book for me. She like read over it and made sure that it was legible enough for second to third graders, my target audience. She is a second and third grade teacher for special education students. So she made sure that I had like the appropriate vocabulary, but it was done by me, yeah. Thanks.
Anyone else?
Do you have a team that helps you, like other students or friends or anything, like with your journey on creating these books and stuff?
Yeah, my narrator for the YouTube video is one of my best friends. She helped coordinate sending emails out to different Girl Scout troops, and like with the publicity on a back alley level, and then another friend of mine ran my social media accounts for this book. So when it came to posting for Alzheimer's Awareness Month, she had like facts on the Instagram and would post when there was a different audio book. So I have multiple audiobooks in different languages, and half of them were narrated by friends of mine who spoke a different language. So I have 10 languages up there, and 5 friends narrated them for me. I also worked with like the Alzheimer's Association, and Robin Cohn, who is an employee there. She helped me get supplies to hand out to kids, so that they stayed invested in Alzheimer's, and so maybe they could bring something home and their parents look at it. So yeah, I had like a good team and a good community around me, and I still do.
Okay, I think we'll take one last question.
I'm sorry if you answered this already, but did you traditionally publish or did you self-publish? And if whichever one you chose, what were the considerations before you made that decision, like whether you wanted to pursue it on your own or whether you wanted to go the traditional route?
I didn't go the traditional route because it was a gold award, Girl Scout award. We cannot monetize off of it. So one of the biggest factors was the cheapest option possible. So like I didn't pick a hardcover book. It's like soft cover, and I published it myself on like through a website, and they like posted the ebook, and I had friends and family donate to help me pay to get copies printed for people to hand out at different events. But that was pretty much it. It was just published through a website, and yeah, so there should be copies in the hallway. So.
Yes, I think we do actually have some hard copies available. And for those of you online, there should be a link to the video narration in the chat. So I'm sure she'll be available after the program for any additional questions, any other young people that may want to ask her questions specifically about Alzheimer's or managing that when it's in your family. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And we'll hand it back over to Reverend Britt.
I am just smiling and beaming under this mask. I've worked with young people for years, and I just am so inspired. So I wish you continued blessings, Valencia. Okay, my task next is to introduce our presenters for the brain health section of the program, who will have a conversation about Alzheimer's versus mental illness. We are so pleased to have with us, I call them Dr. Couple. We are so pleased to have with us today Dr. Emma Wallace. Dr. Emma Wallace is a vascular neurologist, having completed her adult neurology residency, chief residency, and vascular neurology fellowship at Montefiore Medical Center. She's currently completing a second fellowship in endovascular surgical neuroradiology. Sounds impressive to me. At NYU Langone, under the tutelage of Jeffrey Farkas, MD. She earned her MD and PhD degrees from SUNY Downstate Medical Center. Dr. George Banning is a recent graduate of Ocean University Medical Center General Psychiatry Program and received his MD and MPH, Masters in Public Health, from SUNY Downstate in Brooklyn, where he worked closely with implementing HIV testing screening during student-run clinics and worked with KIPP teaching sexual health to young adolescents in the Brooklyn community. He is currently the new fellow at Montefiore and is happy to actualize his ambition to learn and treat substance use disorders in a community that will make him feel welcome. And yes, they are married, correct? Okay, dynamic, powerful couple. Let's welcome them. Please come forward.
Morning.
How is everybody doing today? Good. Nice to be here.
Wonderful.
Thank you for inviting us to be able to have this conversation about Alzheimer's. And what we want to do is we want to talk a little bit about Alzheimer's, but we really want to share our families with you because, you know, we in our communities, we take care of our families, and we wanted to just have this chance to share our family with your family.
And I think besides just sharing our family with your family, also understanding that, which was wonderful by our younger presenter here, talking about like what happens with young people, but also as older people dealing with Alzheimer's, sometimes our family members, like, you know, some of us are in our 30s or our 40s or in our 50s, we're dealing with family members who have this illness and how we accept, understand, and treat, because also caregivers deal with a lot of issues, and some of the stresses they deal with are very deep and very difficult. But if we can have a sense of understanding and community, we can provide some resources or at least some understanding of how to do that.
So that's why we called our presentation Alzheimer's Disease Across the Generations, because it doesn't just affect the person with Alzheimer's, it affects the grandkids, it affects the parents, it affects the grandparents, it affects the aunties and uncles and friends. And we'll take the opportunity to try to shed a spotlight on the mental health component of Alzheimer's as well. So, just gonna see. Okay. So this is my grandma. Before I talk about my grandma, I just want to give you guys a little bit of background, which I'm not sure if you had it during your first session about Alzheimer's disease and what it is. So, you know, Alzheimer's disease, it's a neurodegenerative disease. And what that means is over time, parts of the brain, they become sick and they lose their functionality. Alzheimer's disease affects the part of the brain that's heavily involved in memory. So oftentimes you'll hear people talking about the first sign was, you know, grandma didn't remember where she put her shoes, or grandpa left the stove on. Those are those early signs, and that's that part of the brain here, the temporal lobe, that gets affected. And what it does is it breaks down or impairs the ability for transmission of information. So like what Dr. Banning and I are doing is we're having a conversation, we're transmitting information to you. But if you could imagine having pillars put between us, maybe the microphone doesn't work as well, there's a lot of static. So that information doesn't get transmitted as well. And over time, the static gets worse. The pillars become a wall, so that information just doesn't get across. And if you could imagine that, that's what's happening in the brain of somebody that has Alzheimer's.
And to piggyback off what she said, besides having these pillars be in the way of us transmitting information or having information transmitted to different parts of the brain, there's also a behavioral component. So a lot of times patients may experience what we call hallucinations, and they get depressed and they get anxious. And so what happens is that, so some patients will experience like we call hallucinations. They'll like see things. You know, I can talk about my dad, you know, firsthand, and that like, you know, I remember when he first was diagnosed, he would say, well, it was getting a little bit worse. He would say, there's somebody in the room over there. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he kept talking about these boys in the room, and I was like, what? I didn't get it. But I didn't realize, even though I was a doctor myself, because I was in denial a little bit, my father had Alzheimer's and he was having hallucinations. And some of these hallucinations can be very scary. I mean, imagine you think someone's attacking you, and you can literally see someone in your face attacking you, or someone in your room, or something happening. That's very unnerving. And that, along with suspicion, because you're forgetting things and don't know what's happening, can cause a lot of duress and stress for a person. So then that person's now upset, they're angry, they want to fight, they're aggressive, and this is someone you love and care for, you know? So when someone you love and someone you care for is being very aggressive towards you, and they're wanting to fight you, and they're seeing things, that's a lot to deal with. And that's when the mental health component becomes in, because then they see someone like me or a geriatric psychiatrist who can help them deal with some of the behavioral components. And it's hard because, again, caregivers are the ones who are seeing and dealing with the brunt of all of these different manifestations of Alzheimer's.
Do you think this is a good time to talk about grandma?
Yeah, yes, please.
So this is grandma. It's my grandma. She's beautiful. Her name's Eugenia. And I met her when I was about 5 years old. So I was kind of whoa. I didn't expect that, sorry. I was a child experiencing what Alzheimer's disease was. She was born in Trinidad. In a really small part of Trinidad called Kaiwal. And we've done a little bit of family history, and if you go back about 2 generations from her, that grandma was a slave. And she raised up 8 children. She was a very, very hardworking woman. She didn't get to go very far in school, but she knew that education was important, just like all the grandmas and grandpas in this room right now. And she told all of her children, you have to go to school and get an education. So with what many immigrants do, she sent her children to England. The children went to England, they became nurses, they became social workers, and then from England, the children moved to America. So when my part of the family left England and came to America, she actually was already in the early stages of her Alzheimer's. Christmas was a big thing in our family, big thing, and it was all centered around her. So we would have these huge feasts where all of the family would get together to come to see the matriarch, and I can remember, you know, the cooking in the house and the calypso music playing and seeing Grandma in the living room dancing, enjoying herself. And it was lovely to experience all of these things with my grandma, but there was another part of what was happening. She was losing parts of herself. As time progressed, you know, Grandma couldn't feed herself anymore. Grandma was able to be up and walking and dancing, but she lost that ability too. And Grandma lost the ability to speak. But in this transition from, you know, this beautiful woman that was so functional, there were periods of time when she would have these angry outbursts. And this is a 6-year-old experiencing it. It was so scary to see. And, you know, I wonder, Dr. Benning, what happens with a 6-year-old when they have a family member that's dealing with mental illness, Alzheimer's disease?
Okay, so the 6-year-old will sometimes not fully understand what's going on. They'll say, you know, why is Grandma behaving this way? And they may chalk it up to just Grandma being kind of silly or not knowing what's going on. Sometimes they may see the family having some changes in terms of the stress of the illness and the caregiving and caregivers having some stress and not being able to handle it. So what happens is that they get a little bit irritable, they get a little bit depressed, they get a little bit unsure of how to deal with things. And because they don't fully understand what's going on, they may become a little bit isolated sometimes. So it's important for us to see that with young people, like, you know, they're not as slow as you think they are. They may not fully understand everything, but they're beginning to understand that something's happening in the family, in the dynamic, how mom and dad are behaving, why aunties are coming around more, why is Grandma causing this issue in the family. And that sense of irritability and anxiety is something that we should all look for. A 6-year-old may not understand how to say, I'm nervous, or I'm scared, or I'm fearful. So they act out. And when they act out, that's when we as parents and as cousins and as loved ones can say, hey, you know what? There's something going on. Let's try and help this person as well, because they don't understand what's happening. They see the pillars of their family falling down, and they're really nervous and scared.
Right. Now, just if we go a little bit into it was the past, but move forwards. So my grandma, she passed away when I was in 8th grade, like 13, 14 years old. And I remember we took her back to Trinidad, and she was buried in Trinidad. And I'd seen my mother cry one other time in my life, and at my grandmother's funeral. 2 times in my life had I seen her cry, never before that. And as a 13 or 14-year-old, I understood that Grandma is not with us anymore, but I couldn't understand why she was taken away from us. And I knew she had had Alzheimer's disease, but it pained me, and it quite frankly made me angry that my grandma was taken away and my mom was crying in a way that I could never fix for her. So when you get to that age, what happens?
At that age, it's interesting, because what happens is, you know, you're now not an adult per se, but you have like adult-like feelings. You have more of an understanding of who you are. You know, when I think about like the stages of like development in a child, you know, there's that like we call the, you know, formal operations period in terms of like what Piaget talked about. I'm gonna go there, but it's about you understand a lot. You understand abstract thoughts. You understand what's going on, but you don't understand how to really address your depression, address your irritability, address your fears. You're growing up, you have all of these hormones in your body telling you different signals, and you don't know how to really respond. So then when there's acting out, lashing out, there is cutting school, there is all the things that parents would say, oh, be a good boy or be a good girl. And you don't understand why you're doing this, but because you're fearful of what's happening. You see your whole family almost falling apart. And when Alzheimer's causes such a rift, not rift in terms of the family falling apart, but in terms of the rift in terms of what happens to that person. And you're trying to figure out, who is this person? And they left us. And they left us not only physically, but mentally. You see them literally not being themselves anymore. You want to get back to that person. You're dying to get back to that person. And when they're gone, you're so sad. And then, of course, you have to deal with the fact that you're trying to figure out how to help your family. And the anger. The anger is something that young people don't know how to necessarily express or deal with. I mean, as an adult, you can say, you know what, I need to go to therapy. I need to talk to my pastor or some friends. But a young person may not necessarily have all those tools. And so it's very difficult for them to understand. So sometimes kids can do things and resulting in sometimes using substances, maybe drugs, or sometimes doing things like, fighting people or fighting everybody else. And, they're being isolated because they don't know how to deal with the fact that this piece of their life is now gone.
So it seems like, just from this one family member, you can have so many ripple effects from not just the Alzheimer's, but the mental health aspect of how families manage things. But what do you think about talking about the adult component? Let's talk about Grandpa.
Grandpa, sure. So this is me and my dad. He has Alzheimer's. He is literally, I call him little me because I'm literally his face, but it's not a tall person. And my dad developed Alzheimer's, 7, 8 years ago. I didn't want to think about it. I know I was in medical school, starting residency. I was trying to deny my father being sick. I'm like, it's just a little Alzheimer's. And my dad would often joke, I have old-timers disease. I forget things once in the blue moon. I said, it's fine, no big deal. My dad, like anybody else, liked a little bit too much salt sometimes in his food and too much meat. So, okay, no big deal. I think it's fine. But looking back at some of the things he was talking about, he was telling me or informing us of some of the changes he was experiencing, and I didn't think about it because I was so fearful. And, being a caregiver was one of the biggest fears I was thinking about because my family, we're like, oh my God, daddy. But then we realized that he was having this experience and we didn't know how to really take it and understand how to deal with it. I remember, we have a small child. Well, he's actually big now, but he would take him to school and bring him back home and all those sorts of things. And as he got bigger, he stopped doing it and it was no big deal. But then he would do errands for my mom and make mistakes, small things, like he would forget to pick up the onions or like get the wrong thing. And I mean, we're thinking, okay, he's just a man. Men do make mistakes. But it wasn't just that. It was more than that. He would make mistakes, forget to pay bills. He would, do things, and we would just chalk it up to just being older, but that's not an appropriate response. And I think that's something that we should all think about and look at when we're talking about Alzheimer's, because sometimes you see it in your family members, you see it in your community, and you don't think about addressing or talking to that person or seeing if they need help. So what do you think in terms of how I thought and or what that represented like?
Right, so dementia, there's a spectrum of illnesses that cause dementia. Alzheimer's just being one of them, or one of the more common causes of dementia. And what frequently will happen is the first sign will be, Grandpa didn't pick up the right item in the supermarket. Okay, no big deal. You can go back to the supermarket and get it. I'm sorry. I hope you're okay. Okay. And what Dr. Banning was kind of describing was actually mild cognitive impairment, MCI, that his family was kind of was noticing with his father. So these are the small things where you have an impact on something that we call activities of daily living. These are things like paying bills, being able to go to the grocery store, pick up the appropriate items, and there are a few other things that are components of activities of daily living. But they were initially being impaired, and they noticed it, but they tried to normalize. They said, oh, it's just, Grandpa's just being a man. He doesn't really, he's just making a mistake that a man would make. When actually, in fact, those are the early signs of his cognitive decline. So these are things, you might be at home, might have a family member that might be doing these things, and you should try to think about it just a little bit more and not just say, oh, I forget sometimes too, so they're forgetting in the exact same way that I am.
Yeah, and when we normalized it, we just thought it was no big deal. Then eventually, his primary care doctor said, I think he may have Alzheimer's, and it was to my chagrin. I said, oh, damn it, Daddy's sick. And then so finally, he saw a neurologist, and he was formally diagnosed, and, we began to notice bit by bit, some of his other things were like not being taken care of. He wasn't taking care of himself. He wasn't eating the way he used to eat. And what I noticed was that my parents are immigrants, he loves to eat with his hands. And he couldn't eat with his hands anymore. And he's like, oh, who does that? And I'm like, really, Daddy? And it was like, oh, okay, these are the things he was doing to compensate and to hide the fact that he was having these issues. And so then after a while, he wasn't taking care of himself. He wasn't eating the way he would normally eat. And then, the toileting became an issue. And then all the different things started manifesting itself. And it became, I see something. And those small little things we call hallucinations were happening with my father. And I was kind of like, wait a minute, this is really something going on. And then the aggression, my mom, she's a very doting woman, and she was always trying to figure out what was going on. Why is Daddy wanting to fight? Why is Daddy upset? And then we realized that he was getting worse, and that was kind of unfortunate. And I'm going to fast forward a little bit, but now my father, he's still alive, and we're taking care of him. But as caregivers, we go through a lot. It's my parents are being immigrants, and we are Black as well. We do the home care, and it is very difficult. And sometimes we think, oh, nursing home, but we can't because it's a cultural thing we don't do. But it is very difficult, for caretakers. It's a 24-hour operation. It's me coming home from work, taking care of him. It's my brother being there all the time, taking care of him. It's my mom being there, retired, taking care of him. And it's a lot of work. And we're dealing with sometimes the aggression, the angry, the fighting, the spitting, the punching. And it's hard. But I think that once we understood what was happening and we got him the appropriate medical care, including me being who I am, and of course my wonderful wife telling me, hey, go here, do this, do that, whatever, we're able to manage. But it is something that is a full-time responsibility and caretakers have to deal with.
So I think in closing,
Yeah.
we tried to come up with what can we do now in order to maintain brain health. So I'm just going to list off 3 things from the perspective of a neurologist, and Dr. Bannon
Okay.
will do so from the perspective of a psychiatrist. So the first thing that I would say that you could do is exercise. And I don't mean, I don't mean going to the gym and lifting heavy weights. I mean just walking. Walking is one of the best things that you can do. We're humans. We're made to walk. That's why we're designed the way that we are. We walk. Just walk. If you could do 20, 30 minutes a day, perfect. The second thing, get a primary care doctor. If you don't have one, find one. There are so many things that you can do, even if it's getting a diagnosis of hypertension that you didn't know that you had, getting on the right medications, and getting your blood pressure controlled. That is a world of difference for your body. You don't feel high blood pressure. Your body feels it, but you don't feel it. And then the last thing is to stay mentally active. Read books. If you can paint, paint. Just something that's mentally stimulating for you, do that. Those 3 things would make a world of difference for your brain health.
And all my answers, but it's okay. But I think the most important thing also is to think about substance use, because sometimes we think about, oh, it's just a little bit of alcohol, oh, it's just, even tobacco or smoking, but these things can insult the brain so many different ways because it affects memory and also cognition. So if someone is drinking excessively, they have issues with memory. Also, smoking is one of the most dangerous things. I mean, I'm not here to preach, but smoking, because again, smoking can affect arteries affect the force blood to the brain, and then therefore you have more risk. So if anything else, trying to be healthy in terms of avoiding substances would be one of the best things I can tell someone. And also, people with mental health concerns, whether it be depression or anxiety, should try to get them addressed. So talking to your PCP is important, because sometimes your PCP can direct you into the right path of getting the help you need. Also, I would say finding social supports, because social supports are so crucial, and I think it's so crucial to have your community with you. My mom is a church-going woman, and I think her going to church, her faith in God, has been a pillar of strength for her. So having someone going to church, keeping your activities, because caregivers definitely lose themselves. So a caregiver can definitely continue to live their lives, go to church or whatever religion they go to, have activities, exercise. It's so important, because then it allows them to also keep their own mental health in check as well. And also, in terms of preventing any, not preventing, but trying to deal with, some of the issues with Alzheimer's, besides reading, also engaging your brain. Always trying to learn something new. People have that old saying, can't teach an old dog new tricks? Try. Because at the end of the day, if you keep trying and using your brain, it's like a muscle. If you keep using it, it will definitely get some benefit. So those things are very important. So I would always say support for the person and for the family members, and also refraining from substance use more than anything else. Having a drink isn't a bad thing, but excessive alcohol use and substance use particularly can definitely affect the cognition and can definitely lead you down the path to having some issues with Alzheimer's.
Thank you. We're happy to take questions if anybody has any. Yeah, please. Can I give you a hug?
Pleasure.
I saw my grandmother pass away from this as well. And then now, currently, I'm 33, and I'm the only child. So I'm currently going through this with my mom now. So I just want to see what advice you have for me. She's been my rock right now. So she's been helping me to get through this, because it's rough. Sometimes my mom is happy, and then sometimes she's just mean. And I don't know, how to handle certain things. So when you were saying that, that's why I started crying, because I'm only 33 and I don't know how to get through this.
You need a support system. I'm happy you have a rock. That's fantastic.
Your rock is your sister? Your
Okay.
girlfriend. Thank
She's a
you.
wonderful person
Thank
to be
you.
a
Thank
rock.
you.
Thank you. We appreciate that. But I think besides having your rock, I think it's important to have other organizations who can help you out in terms of finding social services. So getting possibly a social worker or someone who can help you with the services in the community that you can get, whether it's getting home health aid, whether it's getting, a doctor comes to visit your mom every couple of, months, see what's going on, or even a couple of weeks even. These are all things you need to get and things you can definitely ask for, because you deserve these things. So getting that is very crucial as well. And also you yourself getting your own mental health services, because you're going through a lot, and I think that it's important that you see what you can do, and also setting yourself up so that you have your support system always there with you, and understanding how to use whatever you need to get. Because it's hard sometimes to say, I need help. But there's nothing wrong with saying, I need help from my mom. nothing wrong with her getting the help she needs. So it's very important you get that.
Another thing that I just want to say is, for the Black community, so the Black community and Latino community, we are the ones that bear the brunt of taking care of our family members that have Alzheimer's. So full-time job we're doing, plus everything else that we have to do, and that's a lot. So like what Dr. Banning was saying, well, the things that we don't do is we don't accept help in the home quite frequently, for a whole host of reasons. COVID just adds a whole nother layer of complexity to it, right? But having help or being willing to take the help is a huge part of the system that you're going to need to develop in order to be able to get through this, seeing your grandma, now seeing your mom. There so we kind of heard the sprinkling of Alzheimer's Association, so the website is alz.org. There's a ton of information that you can find there through the Alzheimer's Association, including information about support groups, because you need it. As a neurologist, I don't know who's taking care of your mom, but your mom should be seen by a neurologist, and not just a general neurologist, but a cognitive neurologist whose specialty is taking care of people like your mother. That way, if there are any medicines that you and your family were interested in trying for your mom to help with what you're going through, that person's the expert, and they can counsel you in those things and help you. Additionally, a lot of times they have resources. It's a you need a huge family to be able to take care of somebody that has Alzheimer's. They have a lot of resources available to them because of what they do, the work that they do, and they can help to direct you towards those resources to help you to be able to manage what you're going through. You're welcome. You're very welcome.
Show them some love. Thank you so much. We appreciate you sharing your story with us. And this is such a privilege, you all, to have the experts here, right here in front of us, that we can just ask questions of. So thank you. As they take their seats, and before I introduce the next person, some of the information they shared was also shared last week with part one, where we had the caregiver panel, and they just reiterated some of the things that the caregiver panel said. But we also remember we had the Alzheimer's representative here, New Jersey Alzheimer's Association. So we have that information. You take this information home, don't just put it in a corner somewhere and let it collect dust. Read it and use it. And if you have questions, come see us, okay? Come see us, and maybe we can put you in touch with someone else. There's just a wealth of resources right here in our congregation, okay? And right here in our community. And right now, we have another expert. Did you like that segue? We have another expert who is going to discuss clinical trials. Another important topic for our people and our community. We have with us today Dr. Michelle Papka, who is the director and founder of the CRC-NJ. She's going to explain that a little bit more. She has over 30 years combined experience as a researcher and clinician, specializing in the field of aging, Alzheimer's disease, and dementia. She's practiced as a neuropsychologist, psychotherapist, and researcher, serving as the principal investigator on over 35 recent clinical trials for Alzheimer's disease, memory impairment, or mild cognitive impairment. She's had numerous publications of her work in this field, and she is passionate about the goals and mission of the CRC-NJ. She strives daily to contribute to the diagnosis, treatment, and cure of age-related cognitive decline. Let's welcome Dr. Michelle Papka to the podium. Yeah, the podium. Let me just stick this on here.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me. And sorry, let me just. I'm having a wardrobe malfunction with this mask here. Okay. I'm a little nervous because I can't fully see my slides from here. So if you see me looking down, it's because I have my slides on my phone, not because I'm texting. So I am here to speak with you today about clinical trials in Alzheimer's disease, and I'm going to focus primarily on on the prevalence of Alzheimer's disease in the African American community and the need to include and involve African Americans in current clinical trials for Alzheimer's disease and memory disorders. So I really want to thank the speakers before me for sharing their personal stories, and Valencia, I'd love to have a signed copy of your book to keep in my office and to help distribute. And thanks for sharing your personal stories. I'm going to talk about things perhaps at a more institutional and global and national level. I'm sharing with you here the 2022 numbers from the Alzheimer's Association about Alzheimer's disease and its effect on our community. And while I'm not going to read all of the numbers to you, you'll note that 1 in 3 people die of Alzheimer's disease in this country, and we have more than 6 million Americans, thank you, who have Alzheimer's disease. And in the Black community specifically, these numbers are really much, much higher. So Black Americans are twice as likely than whites to develop Alzheimer's disease. And it's projected that over 21% of Black Americans at the age of 70 or older are living with Alzheimer's disease. And interestingly, only 20% believe that they have no barriers to excellent care. That means that 80% of African Americans believe that they do not have access to good care, which is something that we need to change. We just talked about resources in this community, and there really are many. 55% of Black Americans believe that significant cognitive decline is part of normal aging, and it is not. It is not part of normal aging. And if we believe it's part of normal aging, that will prevent us from seeking care or intervention. So, and Black Americans comprise a disproportionate number or percentage for paid and unpaid caregiving costs in this country. So now I'm going to switch gears and talk about what is a clinical trial. And a clinical trial is a study that uses human volunteers to measure the safety and effectiveness of potential new treatments or to answer a health question. And I've highlighted, am I doing that? I've highlighted new treatments because I cannot overemphasize that we can only have new treatments with clinical trials. Clinical trials are the way to new treatments. So if we want new treatments, and we do, we need to have clinical trials, and we need people to be involved in those clinical trials. There is just no other path forward for a cure or treatment for Alzheimer's disease. And we have various types of regulatory authorities that review and approve trials. So I, as a researcher, can't just decide I want to test a certain medication in this population and then go about doing it. There are different regulatory boards, including the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and also institutional review boards, which I will talk about again in a little bit. But these institutional review boards are independent boards that are comprised of researchers, scientists, ethicists, community members, to really review a protocol, a plan, a study, to help determine, is it fair, is it safe, are the materials that we're giving people to read or to consider, are they, is the language straightforward, are people understanding what they're agreeing to? Are we not taking, are we taking too much risk? So there are a lot of questions that are thought about and that are discussed by different regulatory boards before a study is permitted or allowed to happen. We also use an informed consent process that I'm going to talk more about. Participation in a clinical trial is always voluntary. It is voluntary, and a person can withdraw their consent at any time. So even if one decides, you know, I want to screen for this trial, I want to learn a little bit more about it, and midway through or even before you get started, you say thanks but no thanks, that is always an option. So you can always walk away from a clinical trial. You are not, just because you sign a consent form does not mean that you are obligated in any way to continue. Every clinical study has a different design and different details about who can participate, how long will the trial last, what is going to be tested, how is the effectiveness and the safety of that intervention going to be measured, how many times will a volunteer have to come to the office, and what will they need to do. That varies from trial to trial. No two trials are the same. And the design of whether or not it includes a placebo. So a placebo is something that looks and smells and feels like the drug, but it actually doesn't have the active ingredient in it. And the way that we often determine whether or not a drug is effective is by testing it against a placebo. And that's because of something called the placebo effect, which is that if you believe you're taking or doing something that is going to help you feel better, you might just feel better because you believe you're doing something. And we know that there's a very large placebo effect in Alzheimer's trials, and the placebo effect is beneficial too. That's why people who are in trials do better than people not in trials, including people who get a placebo, because there are a lot of things that you get from being in a trial that doesn't just come from the medication, and I'm going to talk more about that as well. So why do we need clinical trials for Alzheimer's disease? The main reason is because we need a cure. We don't have a cure for Alzheimer's disease, so that's why we need clinical trials. I've shown here in this chart medications that are currently FDA approved for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. With the exception of the last one, which is Aduhelm, which was most recently approved with a lot of controversy, and it's not being paid for by Medicare right now. The other drugs work at a symptom level, so they may help with some of the symptoms for some period of time, but they are not believed to do anything to stop the progression of the disease. And so right now, most of the drugs, not all, but most of the drugs that are being tested are geared towards trying to stop the disease process. And if we can stop the disease process or slow it down, then we really have a cure. And we're on the brink of that. We really are on the brink of that. There is another medication called lecanemab, which it's a drug that's been made by ASI in a partnership with Biogen, and they just released their positive results and have presented these results to the FDA to make a decision. The other thing is that less than half of all people who have Alzheimer's disease are ever told of their diagnosis. And if you look at this bar chart that I've put up there, you'll notice that compared to other diseases where people are told, the large majority of people who have other types of diseases, including cancers, are being told of their diagnosis, but not people who have Alzheimer's disease. And if you have another type of dementia, not caused by Alzheimer's disease, but caused by something else, the likelihood of you being given a diagnosis is even less. And if you don't know that you have a diagnosis, it's very difficult to be empowered to do anything about it. And so by not getting a diagnosis, it's not stopping anything from happening. It's just leaving people and families really unprepared to take pro actions to be able to address what's going on. And a lot of what we learned from clinical trials is that this disease process, which the two of you really very clearly explained, it's something that's happening in the brain. And it's a medical diagnosis, not a mental diagnosis. There are biological substrates in the brain, mostly plaques and tangles that are found in the brain. We now have ways to see these and to measure the presence of these plaques and tangles in a living person, which is fairly new. When I first started in the field, the only way to know if someone had plaques and tangles in their brain was based on an autopsy. Now we know, based on specialized imaging that we can use, there's even a blood biomarker, a blood test that can help us determine if this could be happening in the brain. And so we have to really work to get rid of this stigma that by having Alzheimer's disease or mild cognitive impairment or memory loss, that this is some sort of mental disease to be embarrassed about or uncomfortable about. It's a medical diagnosis like any other medical diagnosis, and we have to be having open conversations about it so that we can address it. One of the things we've learned is that these plaques and tangles that form in the brain begin forming decades before a person has their first symptom. So someone who begins to show their first symptom at the age of 70 probably had these plaques and tangles developing starting in their 40s or early 50s. And since we know that, and since we now have ways to see these plaques and tangles in the brain, and we now have experimental medications that may help get rid of these plaques and tangles, if we can give these drugs to people before they have any symptoms and start to break down these plaques and tangles, we may really have a cure. And there are, in fact, numerous clinical trials right now that are enrolling people who don't have symptoms but might have these underlying plaques and tangles, and they are getting enrolled in trials to potentially take have these drugs that might get rid of the plaques and tangles before they can cause any symptoms. So one of the biggest obstacles, or the biggest obstacle to finding a cure for Alzheimer's disease is participants enrolling in clinical trials in general. Just we are very, very slow to be able to recruit people into clinical trials, partly because they're not diagnosed, partly because of the stigma, and also largely because a lack of education and awareness in the public, and also among doctors. You know, doctors who are not specialists are really just not aware of all the research and things that we can be doing to help combat this disease. And most Alzheimer's cases and memory impairment cases are not seen by specialists, actually. They're seen in the primary care setting, and most primary care physicians do feel very uncomfortable making a diagnosis. They just don't feel that they have the training and the resources to be able to do it. Recently, the Alzheimer's Association had conducted a study and compared people of different races and ethnicities, their views about clinical trials and medical care for Alzheimer's disease. And I've put this chart here. And among African Americans, one of the largest reasons for not wanting to be in a trial is thinking that maybe they might get sick from taking the medication. So they are concerned about safety, and they are concerned about mistreatment. Interestingly, both blacks and whites are equally mistrustful of pharmaceutical companies, which I think is you know, an interesting statistic. There are other barriers to people being in clinical trials, things like transportation, concern about costs. So participating in a trial is free of cost to the participant because the sponsors, the pharmaceutical companies, pay for everything. And things like transportation and time and things like that are all things that often don't need to be barriers, and if you speak with people at a clinical trial site, they can often help work through those barriers. So much of the mistrust among Black Americans comes from past injustices, things like the Tuskegee experiments and the syphilis trials and other trials, particularly in the South before and after the Civil War. And largely because of that, we have developed institutional review boards. The outcome of those injustices was the development of institutional review boards that I spoke about earlier. And every study and all materials that are presented, any advertisements that you see about any of these medications, they're all reviewed by institutional review boards. We have a very detailed informed consent process where things have to be given in writing. We discuss all aspects of the trial before anybody signs. In studies for Alzheimer's disease and mild cognitive impairment and even preclinical Alzheimer's disease where people don't have symptoms yet, they always involve study partners. So you would be signing with a study partner. You'd be coming by yourself, so it's a partnership, and both people are really considered participants of the study. There are many advocacy groups in favor, global and institutional, that are reviewing safety, and we all need to be working together at an individual, institutional, and global level for people to feel trustful and comfortable about the clinical trial process. And people are highly encouraged to ask questions. We put some materials in your bags, and there are lists of sample questions across these materials. And a study team, we want people to ask questions. We want people to feel 110% comfortable being in a trial and understanding what they're agreeing to before they consent. And again, it's always voluntary, and you can always withdraw consent. Interestingly, there have been numerous studies that have shown that actually African Americans are as likely as other ethnicities or minority groups to participate in clinical trials. And in one study, 80% of African Americans who were surveyed said that they would have participated in a clinical trial, but nobody ever asked them. So we need to invite people to participate. So I am here, along with my colleagues, Kavita and Ernest today, to ask you to participate in a clinical trial. And we're going to tell you more about how you can do that. So why should somebody participate? The advantages to participating in a trial is that you will have access to a multidisciplinary team of professionals who really specialize in this area, and that will give you access to a lot of different resources. You will also be very carefully monitored. You will have access to cutting-edge science, diagnostic tools, and things that you really won't be able to get clinically. So a lot of the scans and other types of specialized tests that I spoke of earlier are not available clinically, and even if they are at an out-of-pocket cost. And it doesn't cost anything to participate. You don't need to have insurance. It doesn't go through insurance. And it is known that people who are in clinical trials do better than people who aren't, and you are contributing to scientific knowledge and helping future generations. So if you're not doing it for yourself, you might be doing it for your children or for other family members. So why you? Why do you need to participate? We know that drugs have different effects in different people. And the only way that we're really going to know that a drug works across a diverse population is to test it in a diverse population. The percentage of African Americans in clinical trials is something like 2% or less. So, and we know that I think by 2030, the prediction is that 40% of all Alzheimer's cases in this country are going to be African American. So we need African American representation in clinical trials to know that these drugs work in African Americans. So we have a psychiatrist here who probably could tell you that there are some drugs, we know this psychiatry has been a leading example, are more effective based on someone's genotype than other drugs. And there is largely now what we call more precision medicine, that the drugs that may work for some people may not work for other people. And if we want to have an Alzheimer's drug that works for African Americans, we need African Americans in clinical trials. So this is a little bit of a summary of what I've already said before. But, you know, another thing to keep in mind is that if we don't have good representation of minority groups in these clinical trials, then it breeds more of this feeling that we are not providing health equity across minority groups, right? Because we don't know if the medications work across the minority groups. So we urge you, please, to participate in clinical trials so that we have drugs that we know work across different ethnicities. So how could you participate in a clinical trial if you wanted? So one way that you can do it at our center is by having a memory screen, and there's an invitation for all of you to have one. We put this in your bags, and it's no cost to you to have a memory screen, and it is it'll take about 45 minutes. It's one-on-one. At the very least, you can get a baseline and see, how you're doing, and you can come back every year and we will retest you so that we have some way of monitoring how you're doing. It is also the entry process to be in a clinical trial at our site, and we invite you to make an appointment to do one. Both Ernest and Kavita will be at the table in the back as you leave. You can sign up today, and somebody from our center will contact you to set one up, or you can use the information that's in these bags, and you can call us or go online and start to schedule one. How am I doing on time? Good? Okay, so I want to just talk through one more slide, and I think I'm going to ask Kavita, do you want to walk through this, or do you want me to do it? Okay, I'll wrap it up. So I was asked to try to give an idea of what happens if you come to our center and want to be in a clinical trial. This is kind of a busy slide, but it will be different depending on the various outcomes. But if you come and you are eligible for a clinical trial, and keep in mind, you could be eligible for a clinical trial even if you don't have any symptoms, because if you're concerned about a family history and you come and you get a workup, we may be able to tell you through screening for an actual study if you have these underlying substrates. So the first step is the memory screen, and we will review the results with you. We might ask permission to get your medical records. We'll ask questions about what medications you're on, what other diagnoses you have, and then if you're interested and eligible for a trial, we will talk to you about, thank you, we will talk, and thanks for writing that nice and big so I could read it. We will talk to you about what you might be eligible for and what's entailed, and we will go through the whole informed consent process. And in screening for an actual trial, that's where you might get access to things like genetic testing and specialized brain imaging and other kind of diagnostic workups. And the types of tests and procedures you would go through really would depend on the trial. And if you're eligible for the trial and you decide you want to move forward, you would move forward, and the protocol would be different just depending on what trial you're in. You could screen for a trial and then get all the information and decide you don't want to continue, and that's okay too. But then you would also be leaving with more information about yourself than what you came in with. So I'll leave it at that. I thank you for your attention, and we'll linger around after. I know we're going to have some time for questions now, but we'll be lingering around afterwards. If any of you want to speak with any of us here, we're happy to answer your questions, and we really invite and hope for your participation. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the audience?
Thank you. This is more just a question so that the audience can have this information. So in terms of the clinical trials that you've been doing or participating, what has your rate of recruitment of African Americans into those trials been so far?
That's a good question. Do you know what the percentage is?
We've seen more over the time. It has increased. So we have seen over, I would say, the last 5 to 7 years, more and more African American getting information coming in to participate in clinical trial. It's still, I mean, the most that we see is Caucasians coming in. But I feel like
It's increasing. Interestingly, so about a year ago, so someone had mentioned November is Alzheimer's Awareness Month. Last year, in honor of Alzheimer's Awareness Month, our group spearheaded an initiative across the state of New Jersey to do a statewide memory screening event. And we were one site doing it. And there were 2 other sites further south of us. And we found that we had a pretty good representation of minorities and African Americans who came out for those memory screens. I think it was like something between 18 and 20% of people who came. And we are going to be doing it again this year in November. Our dates are November 9th and the 16th. You would get a screen. Not as in-depth of a screen as what we typically do if you're not going to be there for an hour, but you will get a screen and then you will be introduced to a resource specialist who will take your results and provide you with different pieces of information that may be of use to you, things like things about brain health, about clinical trials, about Alzheimer's disease, doctors or specialists in the community who may be of help to you, so things like that. So we invite you all to participate in that.
I have a question back here.
That's going to take place at our office in Springfield, New Jersey, and then there's another site in Princeton, New Jersey, who is they're also participating. So November 9th and 16th, and there's going to be an article in the Star Ledger about it coming up, and you can also call us to set up an appointment if you'd like to come. And tell your friends and other people about it, please.
Yes, good afternoon. I have one question regarding the drugs that your clinical study administers as opposed to the medications that most African Americans are on, like for blood pressure and diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
Have any of your studies show that those 2 particular medications that most African Americans take does not agree with drugs that you administer at the clinic?
That's a great question. So every trial has a list of allowable medications and then medications that wouldn't be allowed because maybe it wouldn't be safe to take both at the same time, or they would somehow be not helpful. One might cancel out the effect of the other. So usually a lot of people are taking medications for diabetes or high blood pressure, and most of the times those medications are allowed. In fact, what isn't allowed are people who have uncontrolled high blood pressure or uncontrolled diabetes, because both high blood pressure and diabetes can contribute to cognitive impairment and memory loss. So it's very important that we get those under control, which is why I completely agree. You need to have a primary care physician if you don't have one, because what's good for the body and the rest of the body is good for the brain, because it's all connected. So if it's uncontrolled, then what we're going to say is you need to work with your primary care physician to get yourself on these medications to stabilize these conditions before we would consider having you in a clinical trial. And I know it was in my slides, but The most important part about the design of a clinical trial is safety, 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 safety. Everything is about safety. So no one, the pharmaceutical companies, the study teams, we do not want to do anything that would compromise anybody's safety, even just a little bit. We often will have people who want to be in a trial and we say, we're sorry until you get this under control, or, you know, we can't have you be in a trial. So safety is always paramount. But those, you know, the drugs you can or can't be on depends on the trial. Any other questions?
I tell all my patients this, especially my Black patients. So there's this thing called agency, and every single one of you has it. So when I take care of a patient, they'll say to me, well, I have to do it, doc, because you told me to do it. And I say, no, you don't. We're having a conversation about what's happening with you and your body, and you have every right to say yes, and every right to say no, and every right to ask why, and every right to ask, how is this going to affect me? For anything it is that you're doing that's affecting your body, you have every single right to ask questions. When, I mean, you can talk about it with your parents as well. We have this kind of idea that, you know, what the doctor says is always right, or what the doctor says is always best. You want to be with somebody that, one, you trust, and two, is looking out for your best interest. And for the most part, that's what we're supposed to do. But you always have the right to ask questions. We come from kind of a community and culture where we just listen and take what the doctor says as gospel, and that's it. Ask questions. You have every right to. You have every right to understand what is happening, what is being done. You have every right to say no. I just want you all to take that with you.
And besides just saying no, also having the agency to question the medication side effect profile, because sometimes, like, you know, I remember my father, when he was diagnosed, he was having some kind of like shakes, whatever else, and somebody said he had seizures, and I was like, not really. And I knew this, I mean, neurologist went over here, and also my training, and I said no. And we went back and forth, and, you know, the neurologist wanted to give him medication that could have made him worse, actually. It could have given him a crankier mood, and that really helped him. So because I said no, and we complained, and I kind of said whatever else, we put him on something that was actually better for him. So asking questions, having agency, saying no is always your right, and also you have to always ask, explain it again for me. Because, you know, I always say this is true. Doctor means teacher in Latin, and we're teachers. So at the end of the day, if you don't understand something, always say, I don't understand, please explain. You have a right to understand and a right to know.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree.
And
Very
it
good.
fits
Yes.
with this as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Packman. I know it is well with my soul today. I mean, I am just so elated that this information that you guys came and talked to us, Dr. Bannon, Dr. Wallace, Dr. Papka, Julian, the book. It's just, I'm so elated that it turned out so well. And so we want to ensure that we take in consideration the clinical trials, take in consideration the resources from the Alzheimer's Association and from all the different resources that we have. We're just to bring this. That's what we want to do. We want to bring this information and have you guys take advantage of it. So thank you again for coming out to the second workshop. Just a few housekeeping. We've got the slides there's a slide that'll come up, and as Dr. Papka said, you can schedule a memory loss screening out in the lobby, or you can look in your book bags, and the information is there. We did give out a post-evaluation again, so please fill out the evaluation. We gave out pens, and if you can fill out the evaluation and go to the table and switch it out for your to-go lunch. And then we have folks that will help you fill out the evaluations as well. And then online, please click on the evaluation on Zoom. So thank you again. Thank you, Dr. Bellamy. Thank you, First Lady. Thank you, Pastor Britt. Thank you, everyone and the attendees. And I hope this was something that does well. Thank you.
Before you leave, we just have to say a couple of more thank yous and close us out in prayer. Truly, we want to thank Hill Collaborative. Mount A.M.E is really, really thankful that God sent you our way. We are truly blessed. Want to thank Faith Danzy, Gabrielle Jones, Howard Mosby. Want to thank every partner. Earlier, I want to mention Trinitas Regional Medical Center, which is part of the RWJ Barnabas Health System. They have been with us every step of the way, and we're grateful for their support. I want to acknowledge that Councilwoman Patricia Perkins Auguste came by to say hello and encourage us and to thank us, and took some of the information and is looking forward to receiving additional information from Hill Collaborative and the partners. So we want to acknowledge her. We want to thank this tech ministry. We want to thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank everyone who has played a part in this two-part conversation. Especially want to thank our young people. You see some young people with some T-shirts on. They can help you with the evaluation. That is very important. That is very important. They have on some T-shirts. What's the best way to describe them? They have hearts on them and butterflies. They're black, and they'll be very happy to help you with everything. I will remember for you is what the T-shirt says. Thank you so much. We thank you for that. Okay, as we prepare to close out in prayer, truly, we're especially praying for our caregivers. We have a better sense of what you carry, and we especially want to lift up the family of Harry Allen. Last week, his primary caregiver, Lydia Troutman, was here and shared with us. And Brother Harry Allen made his transition this week. And so we want to pray for the Allen and Troutman village, and shortly this church as well. But truly, let us look to the Lord in prayer. We thank God for the grab-and-go lunches that are available to all. But now let us close out in prayer. God, we thank you for your hand that is upon us. We pray now, Lord God, that we look to you, that we lean on you, that we're reminded by you. In our weakness, your strength is made perfect, and your grace is sufficient. So now, Lord God, we ask that you comfort all families, but especially the Allen Troutman family right now. God, we ask that you continue to give us the sensitivity to be there for one another, that as we go forward as a community, and we walk not alone, not only because of who you are, because of who we are together. So now as we prepare to leave this place, but never your presence, may the grace of Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the communion of the Holy Spirit go with us and before us. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much, everyone.